Hey, what's up guys? My name is Moda and welcome back to the Mining Stacker YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to talk about some of the extremely risky aspects of getting into crypto mining, right? So there's a lot of things we typically cover. The two topics we're going to cover here is something that doesn't really get talked about a whole lot, but it does need to get addressed. Okay, so we're going to talk about those risky scenarios on top of the typical things we talk about frequently here. So we'll get into that. We'll give our thoughts. We'll give our opinions. It's just more of a warning, especially for any of you guys who are newer as far as something that could potentially happen. Okay. So if that sounds good, guys, stay tuned. Let's get right to this damn thing. For those of you guys who are frequent followers, we do talk about ASICs a lot. We typically talk about, the possibility of what can happen as far as profitability goes, right? We typically know, as we've talked about, to not just solely go by the profitability and calculate your ROI. You have to take things into account such as the network hash rate, how it's going to affect your yield, the individual project. For example, Caspa has their crazy hash rate increases that have happened this past year, as well as their token emission reduction on a monthly basis, right? As well as looking into other aspects, even beyond that, like getting into the actual project. Like one big thing with any of the Zell hash miners, any of the like Z15s, Z15 Pros, etc., like looking into the coins that it mines themselves. For example, Zcash is having a halving in about 12 hours. When you look further into the project, you know that they are fully pretty much committed to going to proof of stake eventually, so that's something that's going to be farther down the road. Horizon also does have a halving on that same ASIC in about 19 days, but this one doesn't even matter anymore because they are going proof of stake. So these are the types of things we typically talk about as far as taking considerations and risk factors when deciding to purchase an ASIC. So we're going to talk about two specific scenarios, one that happened to somebody recently and one that actually happened to me recently. Okay, these are risk factors that we typically don't talk about. Talk about these things, I give my honest thoughts and feedback on them. And we've mentioned how much of a risky play ASICs are. This is another huge risk factor on top of those things once you actually get your ASIC, right? This is pretty much before you're even able to really start mining. These are things that can happen. It's going to happen to anywhere from 1 to 10% of all ASICs. Not all of them are going to be perfect. Unfortunately, there will be some that are DOA. Okay, and in this case, we're going to share Carlos' story here regarding his experience, extremely shitty experience, might I add, with bitmain regarding some KS5s that he ordered from BT miners. Okay, we'll just get right to it. I invested over 30K in 3 Antminer KS5s from BT miners only to have 2 units arrive defective. Okay, so only 1 out of 3 was working. This isn't something where over time this happened. This was essentially DOA right off the bat. Okay, so he did purchase from BT miners. Did go through extensively. He was able to provide me all the emails, all the feedback he got, and he kept good records of all of it. And essentially, just kind of summing it up, extremely shitty customer service on the part of bitmain, and also as well as BT miners to an extent. Okay, so to kind of sum it up, gonna go through it quickly. Essentially had it, contacted bitmain, did get a hold of BT miners also, let him know what was going on. He did eventually have to send them back. Took like a month and a half for him to get any kind of real response. Him diligently just trying to get updates, not even to the point where like, oh, anything like aggressive. He handled it well, and they just gave him a bunch of bullshit answers for like 6 to 8 weeks, right? Essentially, their form of compensation for that was essentially, we'll send you $1,000 coupon from bitmain, right? Is that really going to sum up the fact that this is at the time when there were 10K a unit, and this is during the time when not too long after these things shipped, they dropped immediately down to 3K, and this was also during like the KRC20 hype. He missed all of that. Okay, so extremely shitty on the part of not only what happened, right? That sucks, that does happen, but it's the way they handled it. It doesn't make sense that it takes a resolution of damn near 3 months to get like his working units back. Unacceptable, right? But this is definitely a risk factor that is potentially going to happen. Is this going to happen to everybody? No. Typically, sometimes, depending on the ASIC, right? It gets harder with these altcoin ASICs. And specifically these more like height-based altcoin ASICs. Why? It's because parts availability becomes an issue. Okay, they can be out of stock, out of supply, a lot of risk factors here. And at the end of the day, a lot of times they don't necessarily care too much, unfortunately. Okay, and this is a prime example of that. If you're not a person ordering thousands of units at a time, you're kind of on the bottom of the list. Okay, and it's hit or miss. I have seen other people who also did have an issue, and literally by the following week, they had another unit already in place. Okay, it's extremely hit or miss. You can have something where it's not so bad like that, or you can have something happen like this where it's like 3 months later just to get the freaking units you paid for. Right? It's unacceptable, and it's something that we have to talk about, we have to put out there, and people need to be aware of this scenario potentially happening. And it's not necessarily just a one-off, right? There are batches of units that have very high levels of faulty units. A prime example is like the S19 XP. There were certain farms that had upwards of like 20 to 30+% of faulty units in a batch of like by the thousands. Okay, it's the quality control at times can be atrocious. At times, hopefully you get yours and you have no issues, right? It's not guaranteed you're going to have issues, but just understand that there will be a percentage of people that this can happen to, right? Hopefully, if it does happen to you, it is a fairly quick thing. You want to definitely be on top of it. But in reality, you have no control over how long that repair is going to take, if they're going to be able to repair it. There has been also instances I've seen where people have had units completely scrapped, right? The unit was still under warranty. They sent it, and essentially their answer was, we can't repair your unit. We're going to consider it scrapped. You can pay to get it shipped back to you if you'd like. And that was it. Okay, so a lot of the times, sometimes this warranty is almost irrelevant. Okay, you have to factor in that possibility. Like, even when I bought mine, I honestly didn't think they would last more than like a year and a half without any issues, without the PSU going out or something else happening. Like, you kind of have to go in that mindset. Hopefully they last you a long time, right? There's a lot of stories of certain ones being tanks, essentially, right? A lot of the old S9s, the L3 pluses, a lot of those things are old as fuck, and they are still around and kicking. And others that have horrible, horrible reputations. The S17 being another prime example. It's the one with the damn heat sinks that kept falling off in shipping. Those warranties were also a nightmare for people during those times. Those units were horrendous. Okay, so just understand that that can happen, especially with these newer ASICs. That's why sometimes a lot of people have zero interest in a brand new ASIC. They want to wait a few batches to see if there are any issues. Because initially, a lot of times those people buying early are kind of the test batches. Especially when things are hyped like they are now, when they're literally just producing them and getting them out. A lot of the times there's limited testing on these things, or they can get damaged during shipping. There's a lot of variables you got to be aware of here, but you need to understand that. Okay? So a lot of the blame is just going to be specific to Bitmain. In reality, a lot of the resellers can't do a whole lot for you. Some of them will help facilitate the process. Like if you're unfamiliar with it, you reach out to them. I have seen some vendors who do handle pretty much the whole process to you. They're the middleman, and they're just emailing you everything back and forth, and they're in a way kind of handling it. But at the end of the day, in reality, it is up to you and Bitmain directly. Okay? So extremely shitty situation, something we do have to talk about, and this is why we do praise these other manufacturers who are trying to at least make strides in improving that, right? This is an excellent time for them to kind of continue that and increase that customer faith in those manufacturers. iceriver being one of them, with them continuing to add more repair centers here in the US. Okay, or with AlphaPex also on that same front. Having a repair center in the US is a big deal. Like, because again, they're going to have issues. They're not going to be 100% all good all the time. They are going to be duds. And the hope is that maybe between having all this competition, which is another reason we need to see this competition, and ideally competition with manufacturers outside of China. Specifically in the US would be an amazing thing. So we have more accountability, more quality control, more real expectations of actual customer service. Okay, but In the bear market, this is the time that a lot of the manufacturers will appeal to us. They're going to advertise to us. You'll see them. They'll sell units one at a time. We're at the point now. Why do you think we haven't seen a whole lot from bitmain on the current front? It's because right now it's bull market time, and now they're putting orders in the thousands at a time. They don't necessarily care about us little plebs doing one little order at a time. Okay, at least from them, at least for this bull market. Afterwards, when the market goes to shit again, if it does, then we'll may see a transition again. But just please make sure you understand that risk factor on top of all the other ones. This is yet another layer that's a possibility. Is it going to happen to everybody or a big chunk of everybody? No. Hopefully it doesn't happen to you, but it can very well, right? Like out of all of my units, I've been extremely lucky. I've only had one dud essentially. The one hashboard did fail on my K7 a month after warranty, unfortunately. So I did have to go try to get that repaired. And that in itself was a pain in the ass because, again, we were talking about with the altcoin ASICs. Not that many people are familiar with them. Parts availability sucks. I got like 6 or 7 different quotes. Nobody wanted to touch the damn thing, right? And then I finally did end up going through BT miners. And you guys remember I did do a video documenting that whole process, and that was pretty atrocious in itself also. It did eventually get repaired, but it was not a fan of the quality of the repair. But it's still chugging along a year later, right? So in reality, at the end of the day, it did get fixed. They did fuck up a bunch of the screws, but it is what it is. But understand that risk factor, right? And we don't know how long that ASIC is going to last. Maybe only last 6 months, and you do have a catastrophic failure on the hashboard. All those things are possibilities, okay? So on to the next subject, and this is another one that's kind of, again, it's only going to affect a small amount of people, okay? And this has happened to people in the past. This actually just did happen to me recently, for you guys who caught that post. So we'll just cover the post real quick. Just a heads up for anyone purchasing ASICs, especially if your package heads through Florida Customs. Okay, so in reality, this is kind of more specific. If you look at the post on here, you can see the other ports that have been affected, although all the ones I've seen have been in the South Florida area. Okay, and even prior to this, those were also the ports where people had issues with also. Okay, so again, it depends on where it comes from. Currently, it seems like it's only them. And let's read the rest of it. Saw this warning from a reseller about DHL and can confirm as for the first time I was charged duties for an item that didn't even meet the $800 criteria. Even after providing a ton of documentation, which was the KS2 Lite, if possible, avoid DHL. So in reality, it's not necessarily DHL, it's customs themselves, right? So unfortunately, even reaching through DHL, there's not a whole lot they can do because they're just kind of conveying the info from CBP. In this case, they taxed it completely incorrectly. It shouldn't have been taxed anyway because this one legitimately was under that threshold. Even providing full documentation, I did have to essentially KYC with them, had to provide my social, tax records, as well as records from this device, documentation regarding it, even having a letter from who I got it from, which was iceriver, directly from them, going more in depth. They still refused to honor that, and they were like, you're either going to pay it or it's going to go back, and that was essentially it. The reason I'm saying to avoid DHL, what I didn't mention here also, is because their customer service is horrendous, and it took literally days for me to even get a basic response. Okay, I called, waited on hold for 2 hours, put in an email, put in another thing with a ticket for a callback. 2 days later, absolutely nothing. Waiting to even just get basic justification as to why it was charged that amount, because initially they were charging, it was like a $300 something fee, which even again, if they're going to tax at that 28% rate, obviously for something that's $4.99, it makes 0 cents. Okay, so after the 2 days, they ended up charging a storage fee on top of that. That's what I'm saying to avoid DHL. If I continue to badger them, I could probably get that reimbursed. And also I can file a claim with CBP to try to get that also reimbursed because that one's actually legit. The warning sign here, though, is that, just to give you a heads up, how a lot of the resellers handle their duties. They're not paying those duties fees ahead of time. What a lot of them are doing, essentially, they are undervaluing those ASICs. They're putting it to the point at either $500 or anything under that $800 threshold. in order to not get hit with those tariffs. Understand that there is the possibility that if yours were to get flagged and it gets investigated further, you need to contact your reseller. A lot of them have already had that happen. That's not a super rare occurrence. They will usually have a letter documenting everything. They will send you that letter. You send that letter to CBP, they'll overview it, and typically they'll let it go. Not in all cases. Sometimes they will look further. It's possible that they actually try to look up the unit. Will they go through all that hassle? Who knows? But just understand what you're getting yourself into once you're at that point. Because if they're asking you what the value of the unit is, it's up to you to decide how to decipher through that. Okay, realistically, what should be done is it gets declared at the value that it's actually worth, and then you're taxed on that value. So for example, $500 ASIC, 28% charge, not that big of a deal, even though it shouldn't have got charged, period. But let's say you're ordering a $10,000 ASIC, a $15,000 L9. The 28% on top of that is pretty extreme. Okay, so this is why communication is key with your reseller. You want to pick a reseller that you trust, that you confide in, that you talk to frequently, right? This is why I've always stretched to build a relationship with your reseller, whether it's a store directly, whether it's a person directly, somebody like T-Swift and such, which again is another one who I would recommend because again, you have direct communication with him. He responds immediately. Okay, in this case, he will advise you. What some of them do also is that they'll have you just deny it, they'll send it back, and they'll resend it trying again. Okay, there are also resellers who ship to their location first. Like I know something that Coastal Crypto has done in the past. Typically, like through their orders, they order them, they get shipped to their facility, and then from their facility to you. So will shipping and such be extra? Yes, but you also avoid this headache because they are taking care of that for sure because it's getting delivered to them first. Because then at that point, it's just a U.S. shipment. It's not a shipment from Hong Kong or Shenzhen or wherever it's coming from. Okay, so make sure you understand these things, understand these dynamics, even like on the buying front, like one thing that could have been beneficial here, obviously with that quantity though, they probably wouldn't have done the transaction anyway, is using a credit card. There are very few resellers though that accept credit cards. As a matter of fact, one of the only ones that do actually is BT Miners. Reason being is you do have a form of consumer protection there, right? You can always do a chargeback of some sort, which is the primary reason the majority of the resellers do not use them because of that. Okay, because unfortunately there are a lot of people who use it for nefarious reasons also, right? They will do chargebacks which aren't justified, and they'll do all that mess, right? But just, yes, there are more fees. Yes, there is more. It's more expensive overall, but it is something to consider that it does at least give you one form of consumer protection. Okay, so keep these things in mind, guys. It can happen. Hopefully it won't. Like even this one, again, it's more specific to the Miami port. All the horror stories I've heard are all from down there. This one affected me directly now, as well as a few others with this recently within these past few weeks. So just keep that in mind. And right now with the holidays happening, they're not going to have time to waste scrutinizing these stupid ass little packages. They're going to be focused on throughput because of Black Friday, and this is the busiest time of the freaking year. They're going to be pushing these things through. But just understand that this is a possibility and kind of what to do. In reality, again, contact your reseller. Typically, they've gone through these scenarios and they'll kind of let you know what's up. Okay? So just wanted to give that update in a way. I just wanted to make you aware of these scenarios, right? So on top of all the typical things, this is yet another reason why we always say that the ASICs are extremely risky. It's not as easy as it seems at times. There are a lot of variables that are sometimes out of your control. Things like this can happen. You don't know if you're going to get a dud. You don't know if you're going to get delayed. That's another one that's affecting people right now. Those KS5s, still no word from bitmain. So I'll touch on that real quick also. That's not something that the resellers have any control over either. bitmain literally has them by the balls. They don't like to give any info. You can hit them up all you want. They won't say a goddamn thing until they feel like it. And it's just another lack of customer service thing. You would think out of respect, be like, hey, this is going on. It'll be a week or two out. Keeping them in the dark, right? So again, it's not the reseller. It's the manufacturer in this case. Okay, so just keep all these variables in mind, and it's just, in a way, it might get worse here just because, again, this is the mania phase now. This is the greed phase. This is the phase where They don't give a shit about testing and quality control. It's get the unit out and sell it to the next person, right? Just, this is why I wanted to be done with ASIC mining at this point. At least with this real expensive, guys. Again, some of the smaller ones or other manufacturers, other things going on, it'll be a little bit different, but keep in mind all this, guys, all right? Let me know. Another thing I did want to mention, if any of you guys have any of these issues, any issues with quality control, repairs, customs, shipping, logistics issues, please comment what happened in the comment section. So people just coming in, seeing these things, so they can recount real stories from other people also. If any of you guys have any kind of negative experiences with anybody regarding anything, please put it in there just so newbies or people who are kind of new to the space or considering ordering one, just things for them to consider. Okay? All right. Please comment, like, and subscribe, guys. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I am out.